Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. This evening's edition will host Legislative Issues with Jim Parisi, where we bring the legislature into your living room. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. Now that the General Assembly session has just started, we've been bringing some labor leaders in to talk about the legislative agenda that they've got, and we're pleased to have two folks from the building trades joining us today, Mike Sabitoni and Scott Duhamel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jim, for having us.
So I know you guys have been on the show before, but I always like starting with a little bit of background. Mike, what unions are part of the Building and Construction Trades?
The Building and Construction Trades Council is comprised of 16 trade unions that represent roughly about 10,000 workers in and around the state of Rhode Island. They consist of my trade laborers, Scott's trade, painters, glazers, ironworkers, brick masons, electricians, plumbers and pipe fitters, carpenters, pretty much every craft that's necessary to construct a building and service and maintain and construct our infrastructure.
And you have gotten together, all the different unions have come together. What kinds of things do you do when you come together as opposed to each union doing their own thing, representing their own craft?
Well, the hardest part is making that come together, but it's an art form. But usually we all have a commonality of interests in economic development and the continuing employment of the men and women that we represent in building the roads and the bridges and the buildings that you see in and around the skyline of Rhode Island. The economic downturn has had some impact on our unemployment, which is why we spend a lot of time at the State House on legislative initiatives that'll put our members back to work and keep the investments in the state of Rhode Island that employ the members we represent.
Okay, and you mentioned unemployment. I know it's been high for a number of years. Are you guys seeing any difference in how much your members are actually working now compared to a couple of years ago? Is there an uptick in the economy?
There was a little uptick more on the civil side, which I'll call the road and bridge construction over the last probably 18 months or so. But the vertical construction, which we call in our industry, which is the building construction, has been severely impacted since the Great Recession of 2008 and beyond, to the point we have today, where there is very little, if any, vertical construction, and that has a major impact on all of the building trades as a whole. And we use numbers in our industry. We're probably looking at unemployment hovering around 40%. When you hear the average in the state is 9.1, in our industry it's 40, and in some instances even greater, depending on the craft.
Yeah. And here we are in Rhode Island, sitting at the highest unemployment rate in the country. But again, your members don't look anything like the overall rate, which is 9.1%. So the issue of unemployment is really important, considering what kind of legislative initiatives you folks are working on. Why don't we start talking about the priorities that the Building and Construction Trades has in the General Assembly this year?
Okay, let me make a quick comment about unemployment. You know, you've seen it over the country. One of the stats is that people disappear off the rolls because they are finally unable to collect. They've reached their last. That's occurring with our members. They finally reached the point where they've been on extended benefits, that some of them have no more benefits at all. Mm-hmm. And the other alarming factor, and the state is trying its best, but unemployment is very difficult to get to and get your unemployment compensation. Whereas years ago in this state, in the construction industry, you'd be laid off on a Friday, you'd be on the phone on a Monday, maybe a couple of hours, you'd be straightened out, and the following week you'd receive your check. We have had continual horror stories of members who've been on the phone for 2 to 3 weeks, unable to connect, thus unable to collect, and meanwhile living on nothing. And this has been happening for the past 2 years. And it's unbelievable the people that come to our halls and say, can you help me? I can't get through the unemployment. I can't get my unemployment. And they put the time in.
Yeah, and that's an issue where you would hope state government would be more responsive to people who are suffering from not having work in the first place.
Well, the irony is we laid off people there at the time of the highest unemployment, so you have less people to take care of more people, which doesn't make sense. And I know they're doing their best, but it's never been like this. It's a really continually strange story how you cannot get through to something that should be like that.
And like you said, it's not an old issue. I remember walking a picket line 2 years ago on Pontiac Avenue protesting a layoff over at the unemployment office.
Yeah.
So, what's the top priorities of the building and construction trades?
Well, I would say our number one priority is getting the economy going. So any legislative initiative, whether it be a budget article or a piece of legislation that will help stimulate and prime the pump in our interest, which is construction, investments in infrastructure, buildings, is our top priority, because we also believe that, again, that has the surrounding effect to stimulate and help in a lot of other areas, not only in construction, but education, et cetera. I know you and I have had discussions in the past with regards to the moratorium on school construction, and you know, we always talk about, and you hear our elected officials talk about the importance of education, but yet we have some of the oldest schools in the country, and you know, the necessity to spend some money and reinvest not only in our young people, but in the buildings that house to educate them and your members as well.
I was just astounded that in the height of all this unemployment that we imposed a 3-year moratorium on new school construction and renovation. It was just astonishing to me that that passed. And thankfully, we're coming to the end of that 3-year period, and hopefully things can get going again.
It's even more ironic that at a time when construction materials leveled off and actually started, the cost of construction materials and construction activity decreased, money was cheap, rates were low, at a time when you would think it would make sense for all of the benefits to actually excel your program because of the needs and the necessities, that we would stop altogether, because now interest rates will rise. As demand rises, we start to crawl out of the recession, the cost of materials will rise. So I was of the opinion, as my counsel was, that that was the perfect time to not to stop or eliminate, was actually the perfect time to accelerate for all of the benefits, including the effect it would have had on unemployment and the benefit of the cost of the construction activity as well.
In the midst of this, what's happened with the economy as it dropped out, schools construction particularly hurt us because that's prevailing wage, which is a level playing field for the contractors that our members work for. They pay prevailing wage. So historically, we've done a large percentage of schoolwork. And one of the things about schoolwork, oftentimes it's done in the off-season when there is no school. So it's a very tight schedule with a lot of hours. And oftentimes our members would make in 3 or 4 months, 5 months worth of hours. And in our world, that translates into health care, because our people have to achieve so many hours to be able to get health care. And so that, that disappearing on top of all our other issues is becoming really hurtful. And as you well know, it's kind of obvious, but remember, our members have children at those very schools that are in disarray, and they're worried about their children, never mind their jobs when they improve those schools, worried about the conditions those children and those teachers have to work in when the window's leaking and the roof's got a hole in it and the air conditioning or the heat is off. So it's been really a total mess as far as that's going.
Right, and not just in the urban core, but
same
is true in the suburbs as well.
Every community.
And direct contrast, in Massachusetts, they had a, what's the fund called, Michael? They had a fund diverted specifically to school construction, and they built some wonderful schools, improved schools. They are booming right next door. And we have to watch that at all time with envy as it's occurring, wishing that was occurring within our state.
If I'm not mistaken, the state of Massachusetts actually dictates, I think it's a penny or two off of the state sales tax that goes directly into a building authority fund for the public school system there. And that's why I travel throughout Massachusetts. I have young sons that play in various AAU teams, and I'm astonished when I go to Massachusetts and see some of the brand new high schools and middle schools, and the effect that a program like that can have on a whole community, because basically those buildings are the centers of the communities, and it's something where I think we can look at. I know this session they'll be looking at different ways to fund schools going forward. I know that potentially there are some candidates that will also be talking about their thoughts on how to start the pump and start to reinvest in our public buildings and obviously schools. Sure. So that's something that we will be heavily supportive of, and any influence that we can bring and support, we will be behind that.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I know the Senate in particular is taking a look at school construction now that the moratorium is winding down. Yes. Senator Pearson's heading up a task force looking at those issues. We just need to make sure that we put some interesting and novel ideas before them, and maybe we can get in that same direction that Massachusetts
If they ask us, we will give them our opinion. And maybe we might just tell them anyway, our opinion. And we have some other specifics that we've been working on, still on an educational theme this year. We're hopeful that the pieces will come together on the South Street Station project, which is the collaboration between Brown, URI, and RIC for sharing that space in probably the best public-private partnership I can think about or think of with educational institutions. And it's also our belief as a Building Trades Council that that's an impact project down in the area of the city just outside the Knowledge District line, but that is something that if we take the initiative and get that going, I think will be the catalyst now that the 195 Commission has started to put out their request for proposals for other interested parties. So, making a major investment in that area as both public and private Rhode Island entities, I think will stimulate and attract other national entities to say, hey, something's going on in Providence. We have a unique opportunity here, and we're confident that that'll be the catalyst for hopefully some major development on the 195 land. But that is going to be I know the governor has put in his budget that portion. They have to have the commitment for the lease for RIC and URI as an anchor tenant for that space. But there are a few other pieces that have to come together, but that is probably our major economic development legislative initiative that we'll continue to support and pursue in this session.
And this is the building that's going to host the School of Nursing run by both
the project's now called the South Street Station. We formally refer to it as the Dynamo House. At this point, it's a $200 million project that includes 3 separate parts. One is actually that building, which would house URI, RIC Nursing, and Brown Administration in the actual building. Next door would be graduate student housing and a parking garage. And for us, the plan at this point, if it would go through, is all 3 of those would commence simultaneously, which would put a number of people to work, and they're lengthy jobs. People would go there and they would have a really long employment. And in our world, there's been far too many short jobs. We've done a lot of additions, renovations, small projects. We dispatch members, and they're dispatched for as long as they're needed. They could go to work for 2 weeks, they could go to work for 2 months, or on a project like that, they could be there for 4 or 5 or 6 months. So we consider that. And as Michael said, we joked about it for a while. That's an iconic building in the Jewelry District, which I prefer over the Knowledge District, but they want a brand, so we'll brand it. But I call it the nicest birdhouse in Providence. It's left with its windows open for the past 2 years. It's a beautiful building. It's the highest freestanding building from floor to ceiling in Rhode Island with nothing there, because they used to have all the stuff for the powerhouse in there.
Right, I don't remember.
But you're going to try to get people to buy 195 lots, and as they drive by, they see that one building looming empty, sitting there, centrally located. So as he said, it'll be more than a catalyst. I think it'll really be a sign that we're serious about turning that area.
Sure. So if everything falls in place, how soon can your members get to work on this project?
Well, some of the best guesstimates and the most optimistic guesstimates.
And he's far more optimistic than me.
I've turned towards optimism in 2014, because I do think there are signs that we're moving in the right direction. But the optimistic view for that project would be June of this year, if everything falls in place.
And that's highly optimistic. If anything were to be done by the end of this year, if there was a scratching in the ground, I'd feel very good about it. But there's a particularly a well-respected and a legitimate developer behind this. We think Brown partnership, who better than Brown? They're going nowhere. They've proved themselves time and time again. All the elements that seem to be there with very little ask from the state that this could be, it would really be a jump start for our people.
Mm-hmm. And I just think it makes so much sense now that you have the Warren Alpert Medical School there. You've got the corridor that could connect the financial district through a knowledge district or health district directly through the hospitals. You'd have a nursing education program there. And I just believe that the opportunities are endless. But once we make that initial investment, I truly believe that'll attract other interests to come in and make investments in Rhode Island as well on those freed up parcels on 195.
That sounds terrific. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but both of you just stay in your seats. We're going to continue the discussion. And please join us next week when we do part 2 of the Building and Construction Trades legislative agenda. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us.
For having us.
As you're well aware, February is Black History Month across the United States. We at Labor Vision are proud to celebrate this very special occasion. All month long, Labor Vision will provide a series of profiles and highlights focusing on the civil rights movement and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We hope you are inspired by our Black History series.
Our last panelists are Nick and Eugene. And it's so interesting because last week I was reading an article in the Providence Journal, and wow, they came up with some big news, that there's racial bias in traffic stops by the police. And we know that this has been going on for years and years and years. And so I was wondering if you could tell us about, just first of all, define racial profiling for us, and if you could share about how it has impacted your lives personally and the lives of others in our state, particularly youth of color.
Right, thank you for that. First of all, it looks like Jim Crow Jr. has grown up, and now Jim Crow Jr. lives in the shadows. You know, whether it's the disparity with labor, economic disparity in our communities, whether it's suspension in schools, or racial profiling. The battle of the civil rights movement has not gone away. You know, it went in the shadows for a little while, and unfortunately for us, many of us became complacent, not realizing that the fire was slowly being turned up again. And so here we are. What is racial profiling? Okay. I guess racial profiling can be described as being singled out. Okay. And you are singled out not based on whether or not you've actually committed a crime, but you're singled out because of your skin color. All right. That's basically it. You know, you're walking down the street, you're singled out because of your skin color, you happen to look left, now you're suspicious. Okay? You're walking home from school, you just got off of your bus, you're walking home with your backpack, you have a backpack, you are now suspicious. If you happen to be in the wrong neighborhood, whatever that means, you are now suspicious. Okay. If you want a more up-to-date picture of what that would look like, if you're going to the store and you're walking home with Skittles and iced tea, okay, that is racial profiling. Okay, so it's not just done by law enforcement, it's also done by wannabe law enforcement individuals. And so, as my brother here, Mr. Almeida, has said, you know, we've been at this for a while. And certainly racial profiling has been around since before the country was started. But recently with the murder of Cornell Young, many in the community prior to my and Eugene joining this movement were involved in pushing for legislation to eliminate the practice. And so we had some success early on. We did have legislation passed that allowed us to collect data on racial profiling stops. And guess what we found? We found that minorities are more than likely to be pulled over. I think 4 times is more likely than their majority counterparts. And it also found that a majority of the stops didn't result in anything. They were just pulled over and nothing was found in the vehicle. So, certainly you would think that one piece of legislation would be enough to try to curtail some of this stuff, but no, it continues to happen. We've had several studies, and as you know, we recently had a new study that was released that also illustrates what we already know. Why do we need a study to tell us what we already know, right? So this practice continues to this day, and we're out advocating to make sure that this kind of thing stops. And the reason why it's important that we're doing the work that we do and that folks in the community are doing the work that they do is that if you look at the year 2040, which is right around the corner, right? That's not that far away. A majority of the people in this country will be people of color. So do we do something now to try to stop that practice? Or do we end up in a South Africa type environment in the year 2040 where we have sort of an apartheid system here in the US? Not to say that we don't have one now, But that's something that we need to look at. We need to be serious about that, okay? I'm from the school of Malcolm X, right? And Malcolm X would say, how do you speak to another man that talks a different language than you do? This man comes up to you every day and he kicks you. And you go, wow, that hurt. And you try to get him to stop. Look, stop kicking me. But they don't understand your language, right? So now this man comes and kicks you again and you get wise to it. And you kick him back. Now when you kick them back, you've established rapport and you're now speaking the same language. Okay, and at that point, you can have a conversation and move forward and decide if you want to kick each other every day. Okay, so we're going to get to the point in this country where if these practices don't stop, school suspensions, wage inequality, all sorts of other things where people are going to start kicking back. And when that happens, it's not going to be pretty. But people have to defend themselves, as we learned from Mr. Mandela, who recently passed away. He got to the point where he said, look, we have to defend ourselves, right? So we don't need to go down that road. We don't need to go down that road. We just need to do the right thing now so that when that year comes, when that future comes, we are in a better place. We are a better country, and we are a better community.
Thank you so much. I was going to ask if you could talk a little bit about the key components of the Comprehensive Racial Profiling Act.
Actually, before I go into that, I wanted to kind of answer the second part of the first question on how racial profiling has impacted my life and in youth. I grew up in the Mount Hope area in Providence. I could share probably thousands of stories of situations where police had stopped me, thrown me against a wall, pants down to my knees, searched me. When I first got my license, I had a 1974 Ford Galaxy. I was so proud of my beat-up car. They pulled me over, emptied my trunk, drove away because they didn't find anything. Left me sitting on the curb crying because I was embarrassed. I was hurt as a 16-year-old. You know, I grew up experiencing that type of situation over and over again. And I tell you, I wasn't a perfect kid, but I wasn't a bad kid. I was a kid, you know. Once I graduated, I had the opportunity to join the military, and I did. I joined the military. I served my country. I was deployed various times. I was able to travel to other countries, take my kids to other countries. And what was amazing about this experience is I can't remember one incident, one situation where I was profiled because I was black. I lived in Germany for a number of years, and there was times I was profiled because I was American, right? But never because I was black. And my kids had the same experience. We came back from the military, and you know, I started working for a corporation at the time. We moved to other states, and even in that time, I mean, we lived in Georgia, and sadly things happen, but I can't tell you a story.
What are some of the things that we can do to aid these efforts to stop racial profiling in Rhode Island?
Well, I think you've already heard some recommendations from the panel is to come out, be heard, right? You know, we all have voices. We all have the right to speak. When something happens, even if you're not sure if it had the right or not, pick up the phone. Go down to the station. If it was wrong, make a complaint. One of the things we hear from all of the police departments is we have 0 complaints. Nothing's happening, and racial profiling doesn't exist in Rhode Island because we have no complaints. So probably the number one thing, when it happens, speak up, right? I know for some people, they get a little afraid and feel like, well, if I do, they're going to know who I am. And that's what you want. Can I tell you, I don't remember the last time I got pulled over in Coventry. And any time that I've had any interaction, they call me Mr. Montero because they know who I am. So be heard. Let them know who you are. And there's many of us not afraid to speak with you, or even go down there with you. Speak up. The second part is when these bills are being presented, be there, right? Fill that room, whether you want to talk or not. Just stand there and say, hey, I'm here. This is important to me. That will make the difference.
Hey, how about Providence, huh? Who's driven to Providence lately? Just Angel Tavares. Okay, so that's all right. You know, apparently the roads are kind of bad in Providence. How bad are they? Well, they don't have potholes. They have geological phenomenons. You know what's bad when you don't have an expose by Channel 12, you have an expose by National Geographic. Here to talk a little bit more about it, please welcome some drivers from Providence, Wheelie and the Rims.
Tires go flat and rims get dinged, and no one does a goddamn thing. Nothing. Rhode Island streets are a quagmire. That's a swamp. It's worse than hell. I crept my fire. I fell into a hole and popped my tire. I headed round downtown and the flames went higher. It burns, burns, burns like a ring of fire. My busted tire.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. Tonight, we continue our series of discussions with Rhode Island labor leaders talking about their legislative agenda for the 2014 session of the Rhode Island General Assembly. And today, we're pleased to have the transportation perspective with Paul Harrington. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jim. It's always an honor, and it's great to be on your show.
Okay. So I want to ask you about your legislative program, but let's start with a little bit of background. How many members does your local union represent, and where do these folks work?
The Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 618, we represent approximately around 1,200 members. That's including retirees. I represent the majority of the employees at the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority, as well as multiple school yards, Warwick, Jamestown, and Johnston. And in those yards, we represent the bus operators, and in some of them, the monitors that assist the drivers. Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of variety, but your biggest unit is the bus drivers with RIPTA?
Yeah, my biggest unit is the RIPTA members. And there's a host of classifications that I represent there, from bus operators, maintenance, which is a combination of utility, mechanical, and we do supervision, and clerical, a host of classifications and the ride program, and those van operators and the people that assist back and coordinators providing that service.
Okay, so we've spent some time in previous shows talking about different aspects of unions' legislative agendas. We've talked about budget issues, and I know you have a pretty big issue that it was part of Governor Chafee's budget proposal. Why don't you tell our viewers what it's all about?
Sure. I actually attended the State of the State speech and by the governor, and when he had got to the bond issues, and the first one that he described was for the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority, a $40 million bond issue to improve infrastructure, to modernize and hubs on both sides of the city. This is really encouraging, by the governor, that he's looking to invest into RIPTA and RIPTA's hubs and infrastructure.
And I've seen some of the media, both the TV and newspaper coverage on it, and people hear the word hub, but there haven't been any graphics, there haven't been any pictures. Right. Can you paint a picture for our viewers? What's this grand plan and the two hubs? What are we really talking about?
It's a great question, because some people don't understand the full capacity of what the governor's vision is for RIPTA and improving and modernizing infrastructure in the hubs. So right now, presently, we have Kennedy Plaza. It's been the main hub for our transit and public transit system in Rhode Island, and for the people that depend on it by either want or need for forever, basically. And there are third world countries, Jim, that have better hubs, in all honesty, than we have in downtown and Kennedy Plaza. There is very little shelter from the elements and the weather, and the governor sees that. He also sees that it's time to modernize and bring us in the future. And his vision is that they want to build a multifaceted, modern-day mobility center. Okay, and what he means by that is he wants over near the train station. They want to build a multi-level transportation hub next to the train station. That's one of the hubs that they envision. This hub will be connected to obviously Amtrak. It'll be a mobility center. People can get anywhere from that one centralized location. And the vision, he's accurate. They are. The people that are working on this, the governor himself and the team that he has looking into it, they are 100% accurate that investing in RIPTA, in the hubs and infrastructure, will eventually improve the quality of life for Rhode Island. It'll also offer jobs to a depressed building trades that right now their unemployment is at still, they're struggling to get work. So it's multifaceted. It'll create jobs for the building trades, but even more important, it will modernize and get us in the 21st century as far as transportation facilities with amenities, where people can acquire and get their buses underground. I don't know how many levels. Some of those details have been left out, but supposedly it's going to be an enclosed facility. There'll be a presence of security. It'll be well lit. There'll be options for transportation purchase of tickets and the fares they need. The other hub that they envision is on the other side of the city, near the Garrity building. As we know, the 195, when they built the new bridge and the extensions, opened up a lot of land, and that's available now.
And there's been a commission that's been working for a couple of years now, developing a plan on how to use all this new open space on what it would look like. And it takes a lot of infrastructure just to get that going. We had a previous show on Labor Vision where you don't realize it, but roads have to be paved, you have to put utilities underneath. Infrastructure is important for future development, and the same holds true for transportation, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And that hub, with their plan is to build, it won't be as elaborate as the hub over near the train station that they envision, but it will be a hub that serves the southern state. And we have a lot of service and a lot of passages that come through multiple lines. The Eddy Street number 1 line, the 3 line that comes through Warwick. The southern part of the state that can access that, it will be covered. It'll have ample lighting. It will be adjacent to the jury district, what they want to look to invest in. And the one thing we know and the governor gets is that investing in mass transit is for every dollar the state of Rhode Island decides to invest in its mass transit system, either through facilities or service, pays dividends. There's a benefit. It improves property tax because people want to invest in building and opening businesses near there because they know there will be a certain amount of consumers that are brought and dropped off. It improves the quality of life for Rhode Islanders. There are definitely benefits. I actually had a letter to in the Journal the other day, just streamlining the benefits of mass transit to the state of Rhode Island. And there are true benefits to invest in for every dollar you invest in mass transit.
So is the $40 million bond dedicated just to the 2 hubs, or are there other things that mass transit will benefit from this bond issue?
Well, from my understanding of the bond, it's truly to invest into the infrastructure, to set up the 2 hubs, obviously the construction on the site, and to build the facilities themselves. And also, Kennedy Plaza is involved. Kennedy Plaza, they want to improve Kennedy Plaza. There's a public-private partnership looking into making that public area more attractive, safer, more pedestrian friendly. And they want to make that Kennedy Plaza more into like a super stop. So, and what that means is a majority of the buses will go through there. They won't lay off. It won't be the center to pick up people off or transfer to, but it will bring them to their destination for their work. Because, we all know that the finance district is right there. And it'll be a super stop more than the hub, and that they want to invest in that as well. So I'm looking forward to it. It's encouraging. The governor's commitment to mass transit and RIPTA is also obviously encouraging, and I look forward to these facilities being hopefully in the future construction and built upon.
And if these new facilities are built, these 2 hubs are set up, do you think it will have an impact on attracting new riders into the RIPTA system?
Absolutely. It's I believe that when they modernize these facilities, they make them safer, more convenient. I believe it'll attract ridership. I think people who will want to take the bus more often, hopefully they do. But I believe it'll have a positive effect on our service, our ridership, and the mass transit system that's provided.
Yeah. So you mentioned ridership. I know there's been a lot of ups and downs in terms of how the agency's been funded. You've had some real challenges in the last couple of years, some controversies over routes being shut down. What's the current state of affairs over at RIPTA as far as ridership and plans for expansion or contraction in the near future?
Jim, again, that's a great question. Most people don't know how many people ride our mass transit system, first and foremost. The Rhode Island Public Transit Authority gives approximately 70,000 rides a day to Rhode Islanders. And our presently ridership is up 5.5%. And it's a big number.
In a down economy.
In a down economy. People tend to take the bus more and use mass transit more often based on an economic need. 5.5%, considering that we give roughly anywhere around 21 million rides a year, 5.5% is a large number. It's an additional 1 million rides that we gave. So there's an influx of passengers that are coming into our system. As urban cities grow, and as people tend to, because of the economic downturn that we've been in, they find that mass transit is viable economic savings, and they can get them to and from work. It's also going to be, I believe, part of economic recovery and job growth, that mass transit and RIPTA will offer people the opportunity that don't have other forms of transportation to enter the workforce. So as jobs and when jobs come, and RIPTA will be a viable part of that economic recovery, Jim.
Yeah. So what other pieces of legislation, if any, are you working on? I know in past sessions, I know we had Jay O'Grady on the show once talking about, some legislation he was putting in about your funding stream. So other than this big project, the transportation hub, do you have any other legislative issues that you're focusing on?
Absolutely. There's a couple of bills up there presently. Rep. O'Grady, and I was on the show with Rep. O'Grady. He was fabulous. He was, I thought I was going to be the lead, when we first sat down, because, I'm the business agent over there, obviously for the transit industry and the employees that work there. But Rep. O'Grady was very informative. He understood not only the state end, but the federal end of the FTA end of mass transit. And his bill was, unfortunately, it is for the last couple of years, we've had a problem getting it through the General Assembly. And we look forward to another version of his bill to create some funding for mass transit. What we need is sustainable funding. There is another bill that we've had up there multiple years, and that since I've been president of our local for the last 2.5 years, that I've argued and articulated for and advocated for, is the UPass program. Every private institution and university in the state of Rhode Island has some form of agreement with the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority to offer a bus pass to their students. And what we're trying to do is, with this UPass, is again offer it to our state universities. Last time I checked last year, there were 40-something thousand students that presently that are enrolled in our state universities. And I believe that the UPass is a good bill. It's affordable to the parents in the tuition. It's at $50 a semester. It will raise enough money to add additional service to those universities. At URI in the southern part of the state that desperately needs the service, all they do is down there is build parking lots. And I do have some buildings coming, which hopefully on bonds that will get passed so the school can continue to improve. But they build parking lots because the enrollment is growing and the cars have nowhere to go. And
as a person who commutes every morning on Killingly Street and Greenville Ave in Johnston coming into the city, I can attest to the large number of cars flooding into Rhode Island College campus every day.
Rhode Island College is another university, and it's one of our institutional higher learning that's growing. Its enrollment's growing. It's an opportunity for kids to get a degree, a college degree. It's actually, I believe, it's our obligation to give them the opportunity to go to a university of higher learning and get a degree to better themselves. It will better Rhode Island and betters the quality of employment going future. And
so how would the UPass legislation help college students use mass transit? What's it geared towards?
Well, first, I think that it will encourage them to use mass transit, first and foremost. It'll give them the opportunity to experience it, encourage them to utilize it.
Would it make it available for free or at reduced cost?
The bill was that we put in was going to be $50 per student per semester for a whole $100 per year. Based on the amount of tuition at the state of Rhode Island, the University of Rhode Island, $100 a year is insignificant. At best.
Sad but true.
Absolutely. Every university in this country, and my daughter went to DePaul, and part of her tuition was her bus pass. Her ID was her bus pass. Okay, that she could ride the CTA, right, the Chicago Transit Authority, and it was, Jim, it gave me a sense of relief to know that no matter where my daughter was in Chicago, that she had a bus pass and she could take a bus to work or to school, and as a parent, knowing that your kid's going to a university, I would only think if the parents had some choice in this. And if they were given an option, say, listen, we have a $50 fee per semester, $100 per year. And with that, the school allocates your URI ID as your bus pass. So they know, we know kids, you know, they travel, they like to go out, and to, if we can save 2 lives, Jim, just 2 lives a year, I would think every parent would be more than willing to invest $100 to make sure their child was safe. Plus, it would improve the quality in the green spaces at URI, and it would give more people the opportunity to attend CCRI and Rhode Island College, which are urban state universities. And even the speaker, I had a meeting with the speaker regarding mass transit and hopefully moving forward with future funding. And he's an alumnus from Rick. And that's where he attained his bachelor's degree, and he took the bus every day. So he understands the value of what mass transit and what you can achieve by having a good mass public transit system.
It sounds like a great program that benefits students, keeps cars off the road, makes students safer, and maybe builds a generation that is more inclined to use mass transit. I think it's a great program, and I wish you great luck with it.
Yeah, well said.
Paul, I wish you great luck with the project to get this new dual transportation hubs up and running, as I know you'll be working with the assembly leaders to get that issue on the ballot as well. Paul,
Diligently.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you all for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision.
As you're well aware, February is Black History Month across the United States. We at Labor Vision are proud to celebrate this very special occasion. All month long, Labor Vision will provide a series of profiles and highlights focusing on the civil rights movement and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We hope you are inspired by our Black History series.
We'd like to begin our questions with Representative Almeida. And Joe, you have brought such a tremendous breadth of experience to the Rhode Island General Assembly, to so many initiatives and causes in our state. You played a significant role in helping to get the passage of the Ban the Box legislation rather, that really prohibited many employers from asking applicants for jobs at their workplaces if they served time in prison, if they had a criminal record. In addition, you also were very instrumental in the successful ballot question that restored voting rights to many people within our states who had felony convictions. And so we just want to begin by thanking you for your tireless work. Again, let's give a shout out for Joe Almeida. We want to ask you that based on your role in the Rhode Island Legislative Black and Latino Caucus, what are some of the major civil rights issues that you're dealing with today? What are some of the major priorities of the caucus this year?
Well, hi everybody. Come on, hi everybody. You know, you're looking at me, I'm gonna look right back at you. The whole new civil rights agenda is something that we've all started off with when we remembered regarding the black experience. And there's one particular word that's been left out: economics, money. And that money, we can have all the social programs you want in the world, but if there's no money behind it, how are those programs gonna work? So some of the things that we're looking at is economics. We're looking at tax credits. We want to know why aren't some of those tax credits in our basically the black and brown and yellow and red backyard, how come we're not getting some of that work that goes with it? Now, when people think of businesses, right off they'll say, oh, construction. No, we're talking about law firms. We're talking about construction firms, accounting firms. We have all that and then some. So I know that we're looking at where is the money, how is it that we can get empowered into that, especially now, not just across the country, but in the state. As you all know, we have some nonprofits that are in real trouble, and we've got to find a way to bring that money back to help all the people that we're supposed to serve.
Can you also tell us a little bit about the status of the Just Cause legislation?
Well, it'll be introduced probably, I'd say Thursday when I go back. And so I'm working with DARE, in order to get that squared away, along with Representative John Edwards, which is good because it's not just about the Providence delegation pushing forward. It's also about other cities and towns in the state to work along with the Providence delegation. So we got a rep from Tiverton who gets it, and that in itself will help out.
And can you also explain for those in the audience who may not know, what is Just Cause?
Don't mind my silence. There's so much to Just Cause. There's so much to it. We're basically looking at, the follow-through on, how employers look at employees with a past record. And to me, that's the biggest part of that Just Cause bill. And so, as you all know, as a retired police officer, I'm have to look at life just a whole lot different than most folks. My life was what you call on the line, first line, and the only line. And because of that, the Just Cause bill will help a lot of people who have had criminal records to carry on in a better light and not to be judged forever for something that happened many years ago.
Can you also share with us, Joe, the status of what's happened with the racial profiling study that you helped to push through?
The racial profiling bill, which will be introduced later on, and my good colleagues here to my right, will give you more of a definition, but it's a political fight. As we all know, and let me go back a little bit, when I was a police officer, the National Black Police Association back in the early 80s said racial profiling is going on, and that it has nothing to do with the color of a police officer. There was this officer who used to stop this guy all the time in Lockwood, and he was white, and he would stop this individual who was white all the time. What you doing over here? Kept harassing him because he couldn't believe he lived here. And so that cop is the guy that you're looking at. And I'm like, when I got the edict down from the National Black Police Association, basically it says, who are you to judge somebody based on the color of their skin because they're in a different neighborhood? That carried with me for a long time. As I brought that story to the State House, they all looked at me like I was some kind of a nut, because they couldn't believe that the fact that I'm not a cop. I wasn't, never was. I was a police officer. A cop just goes from call to call. A police officer goes to the call and answers the call. And that is what I like to take up here. So with racial profiling, as we're still fighting it today, with my good colleagues here to my right, they're about to tell you the political ups and downs that we went through it. One of the things that really gets to me with racial profiling, especially, and you'll hear about the statistics soon, but initially they wanted us to put a study commission. What do I got to study something I already know that happens? What do I got to study it when the guy who's talking to you right now violated it? So, in fact, that's why we're still pushing it. That's why you saw the statistics came out a little while ago, like, hey, guess what? You Providence police departments, you're still having a problem. You haven't faced it. So, with all of us up here, we're about to make them face it. But we can't do it without none of y'all. We need soldiers. We need you to come up to that State House. You all don't have to testify, but you need to fill that judiciary room. You need to fill the finance committee room. You need to know where your rights are going. You need to know where your money's going. Because if you don't say nothing, then ain't nothing gonna get done. So come on up front.
Thank you, Joe. And you partly answered my last question, as a matter of fact. Dr. Martin Luther King once said, we must use time creatively, in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right. And in addition to going to the State House, in addition to testifying at these public hearings, are there other steps that we who are here can take to support the legislative platform of the Rhode Island Black and Latino Caucus?
I would like to see everybody, whether you're just from Providence or whatever, I know I see East Providence and different cities out here, you need to contact your local legislator. You voted for him. And when he or she is in office, they become your vocal cords. So I would like to see more involvement of the 39 cities and towns from wherever you're at. Even if you live in one city and you're aggravated at another legislator for not doing something, I'm sure you know something. Like I know people in Pawtucket, East Providence, and so forth. So you need to reach out and tell those folks to tell that legislator to do the right thing for the issues that we're about to talk about today. So get out there and get involved. James Brown says get up and get involved. Why can't you all?
Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
It's been 40 years for this show. 40 years since the Follies was here, you know? The first year goes back to 1973, the year Jack White won the Pulitzer, Watergate, it was all out there. John Chafee was a bigwig in Rhode Island politics, and of course now his son is our governor. You ever notice why Joe DiMaggio's kid didn't win a baseball?
Nothing in the world make it equal in the name. Civil unions are just.
Hey, how about Providence, huh? Who's driven to Providence lately? Just Angel Tavares. Okay, so that's all right. You know, apparently the roads are kind of bad in Providence. How bad are they? Well, they don't have potholes. They have geological phenomenons. You know what's bad when you don't have an expose by Channel 12, you have an expose by National Geographic. Here to talk a little bit more about it, please welcome some drivers from Providence, Wheelie and the Rims.
Tires go flat and rims get dinged, and no one does a goddamn thing.
Nothing.
Rhode Island streets are a quagmire.
That's a swamp.
It's worse than a fire. I fell into a hole and popped my tire. I hit ground downtown and the flames went higher. And it burns, burns, burns like a ring of fire. My busted tire.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.